The morning sun peeked through the windows of the Golden Spoon Diner, casting long shadows across the freshly mopped floor. Maya adjusted her name tag and tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear as she heard the familiar ding of the bell above the door. It was 6 a.m., and right on schedule, the morning regulars started filing in. Mr. Dave, the retired postman, shuffled to his usual corner booth. He didn't even need to order anymore. 2 eggs over easy, crispy hash browns, and black coffee, always served in his favorite chipped blue mug that Maya kept specially reserved for him. She'd learned early on that it was these little touches that made people feel special. The morning rush hit like a wave. The kitchen sizzled with the sound of bacon hitting the grill, and the coffee maker worked overtime. Maya moved between tables with the grace of a dancer, balancing plates up and down her arm like she was born to do it. 6 years of practice had taught her more than just carrying plates. She'd learned to read people, to know who needed an extra smile and who just wanted their coffee refilled in peaceful silence. "Order up," called Joe from the kitchen window. Maya grabbed 3 plates at once, a skill that had taken months to master. A loaded veggie omelette for the young nurse who just finished her night shift, blueberry pancakes for the truck driver passing through town, and a breakfast sandwich for the high school teacher who always graded papers while she ate. Between refilling coffee cups and taking orders, Maya caught glimpses of herself in the chrome napkin dispensers. Her comfortable sneakers had scuff marks from countless miles walked on these checkered floors, and her apron had a tiny syrup stain that refused to wash out. But there was something else in her reflection, too. A spark in her eyes that spoke of dreams bigger than this small-town diner. The regulars loved to chat with her. They shared stories about their grandkids, complained about the weather, and sometimes confided their worries. Maya knew about Mr. Dave's arthritis acting up, and how Mrs. Thompson in booth 3 was saving up to visit her daughter in college. She kept mental notes of everyone's lives, their usual orders, and their small victories. During a brief lull, Maya wiped down the counter and counted her tips. College textbooks weren't going to buy themselves, and her online business classes needed to be paid for somehow. Every extra dollar went into her savings, tucked away with her bigger dreams. She'd learned more about business from this diner than any textbook. How to handle difficult customers, manage inventory just by looking at the plates coming back, and most importantly, how to keep smiling even when her feet were killing her. The kitchen radio played old country songs, mixing with the clinking of plates and murmured conversations. A new family walked in, tourists. Maya could tell from their uncertain looks and highway-weary faces. She grabbed menus and put on her warmest smile. "Welcome to Golden Spoon. First time here." The youngest kid looked nervous, but Maya knew just how to make him smile. She always saved a few extra crayons in her apron pocket for moments like these. As the morning rush started to wind down, Maya took a moment to stretch her back near the coffee station. The diner smelled like maple syrup, coffee, and possibility. She watched the sunlight grow stronger through the windows, painting everything in a golden glow. Sure, this wasn't where she planned to stay forever, but right now, in this moment, she was exactly where she needed to be, learning, growing, and preparing for whatever came next. Little did she know that next was about to walk through the door, wearing high heels and carrying a designer handbag, about to change everything she thought she knew about her future in the restaurant business. The lunch rush was in full swing when the bell above the door chimed again. Maya barely noticed the well-dressed woman who slipped into booth 7. She was too busy juggling 3 separate birthday celebrations, including one where the kids had accidentally knocked over the chocolate milkshakes. Twice. "Just a moment," Maya called out cheerfully, while somehow managing to mop up the spill, comfort a crying child, and signal Joe in the kitchen to hold off on the birthday pancakes. Her hair was falling out of its neat bun, but her smile never wavered. This was just another typical day at the Golden Spoon. The woman in booth 7 watched all of this with interest, her designer handbag carefully placed beside her on the worn leather seat. She pulled out a leather-bound notebook while Maya approached, notepad ready and pen poised. "Welcome to Golden Spoon. Can I start you off with some coffee?" Maya noticed the woman's perfectly manicured nails and elegant blazer, definitely not their usual lunch crowd. "Yes, please. And I'd love to know what you recommend." The woman, who introduced herself as Rita, spoke with a warmth that made Maya feel instantly at ease, despite her obvious sophistication. Before Maya could answer, a regular customer at the counter called out about his coffee getting cold. Without missing a beat, Maya held up one finger to Rita, grabbed the coffee pot, and swung by the counter. "Here you go, Mr. Chen. And don't worry, I didn't forget about your apple pie. It's just cooling so it won't burn your tongue like last time." Rita's eyebrows rose slightly as she watched Maya navigate the busy diner. Every time Maya passed her table, she was doing something different. Remembering that table 4 needed extra napkins, reminding the kitchen about Mrs. Lee's gluten allergy, and somehow keeping track of which birthday party ordered which flavor of ice cream. During a brief moment of calm, Maya returned to take Rita's order. "The meatloaf is our specialty, but honestly, our chef makes the best grilled cheese in town. He adds this secret blend of cheeses that just melts perfectly." "I'll trust your judgment," Rita smiled, closing her menu. "The grilled cheese it is." As Maya turned to leave, Rita spoke again. "How do you do it? Keep track of everything, I mean." Maya laughed, adjusting her apron. "Oh, you just kind of learn. It's like conducting an orchestra, I guess. Everything has its rhythm. You know, Mr. Chen always needs his coffee refilled exactly 7 minutes after his first cup. The Thompson twins always spill something right after their mom gives them crayons. And birthday parties," she grinned, "they're actually the easiest. Everyone's too happy to be too picky." Throughout her meal, Rita kept making notes in her notebook. Maya assumed she was some kind of food critic, though the Golden Spoon had never attracted that kind of attention before. But Rita wasn't just interested in the food. She watched how Maya handled a complaint about overcooked eggs, offering a fresh plate before the customer even finished explaining. How she remembered every regular's name and their stories, and how she trained the new busboy with patient explanations between serving tables. As the lunch rush died down, Rita waved Maya over one last time. "This was the best service I've experienced in a long time," she said, pulling out her business card. "And believe me, I've eaten at restaurants with Michelin stars." Maya glanced at the card, her eyes widening slightly. Restaurant consultant. Before she could respond, a crash came from the kitchen, followed by the unmistakable sound of plates shattering. "I'm so sorry. I have to." Maya gestured apologetically toward the kitchen. "Go." Rita smiled, sliding the card across the table. "But call me when you have a moment. I think we should talk about your future." Maya tucked the card into her apron pocket as she rushed to help with the kitchen crisis, her mind spinning with possibilities. She'd always dreamed of something bigger, but until now, those dreams had seemed as far away as the stars. Maybe, just maybe, they weren't so unreachable after all. 2 weeks felt like forever when you were waiting for something. Maya had tucked Rita's business card behind her phone case, pulling it out during quiet moments to run her fingers over the embossed letters. She'd even Googled Rita's name one night after her shift, finding articles about the restaurants she transformed and the career she'd launched. The morning was unusually quiet when Rita returned to the diner. Maya was arranging sugar packets in their containers, a task she'd done thousands of times before, when she heard the familiar click of heels on the checkered floor. "Good morning," Rita smiled, this time choosing to sit at the counter. "Still make a good cup of coffee." Maya's hands trembled slightly as she reached for the coffee pot. "Best in town, according to our regulars, though they might be a little biased." She managed to smile while her heart raced. Did Rita remember their conversation? Would she just hear for breakfast? "I've been thinking about you," Rita said, stirring her coffee. The morning sunlight caught her silver bracelet, making it sparkle. About how you handle this place. You're not just serving food, you're creating experiences. Making memories, that's rare. Maya wiped her hands on her apron, a nervous habit she'd never quite broken. That's just part of the job, isn't it? No, Rita shook her head. It's really not. Tell me something. What do you think makes a restaurant successful? Maya thought about all the little moments she'd witnessed over the years. Well, it's not just about the food, though that's important. It's about making people feel welcome, like they belong. Mr. Chen comes in every day, not just for coffee, but because we remember how he likes his toast. The Wilson kids feel special because we keep extra crayons just for them. It's about, she gestured around the diner, searching for words, creating a place where memories happen. Rita's eyes lit up. Exactly. And that's why I'm here. She pulled out a folder from her designer bag. I'm opening a new restaurant in the city. High-end dining, but with heart. And I need someone who understands that balance. Maya's hands froze on the coffee pot. I don't understand. I'd want to offer you a position. Assistant manager trainee. You'll learn everything. Wine pairings, inventory management, staff training, customer relations. It's not just a job, it's a career path. The coffee pot suddenly felt very heavy in Maya's hands. But I don't have any formal training. I've never even worked at a fancy restaurant. You have something better, natural talent and real experience. Skills can be taught. Instinct, that's rare. Just then, Mr. Chen called from his usual spot. Maya, honey, this coffee's getting cold. Just a minute. Maya called back automatically, then turned to Rita. I need to. Go. Rita smiled. Take care of your customers. But here's the details. She slid the folder across the counter. Training starts in 2 weeks. The salary's in there, along with benefits. It's a big change, I know. But sometimes the biggest opportunities come disguised as the scariest decisions. Throughout her shift, the folder seemed to burn a hole in Maya's apron pocket. She thought about her small apartment above the hardware store, her online business classes, her regular customers who were more like family. The city was only an hour away, but it felt like another world. During her break, she sat in the back booth and opened the folder. The salary made her gasp. It was more than double what she made now. There was health insurance, paid vacation, and a clothing allowance. Her uniform allowance at the diner consisted of 2 aprons a year. As she read through the details, her hands shaking slightly, Joe poked his head out from the kitchen. You okay, kid? You've been staring at those papers for 20 minutes. Maya looked up at the man who taught her everything from how to call out orders to how to handle difficult customers. Joe, what would you do if someone offered you a chance to change everything? The old cook wiped his hands on his apron and slid into the booth across from her. I'd be terrified, he said simply. But you know what's more terrifying? Wondering what if for the rest of your life. Maya looked around the diner, at the worn booths, the familiar faces, the life she'd built here. Then she pulled out her phone and Rita's business card, her fingers hovering over the keypad. Sometimes the biggest adventures started with the smallest steps. She took a deep breath and started dialing. The first thing Maya noticed about her new life was the silence. No sizzling griddle, no clinking plates, no familiar chatter of regulars telling their morning stories. Instead, she sat in a sleek office, surrounded by training manuals and spreadsheets, trying to make sense of wine vintage charts while wearing shoes that made her feet ache in entirely new ways. Today we're covering wine pairings, Rita announced, spreading out cards with different wine varieties. Maya's old uniform had been replaced by a black blazer and pencil skirt, both part of her new work wardrobe. The price tags had made her wince, but Rita insisted presentation mattered as much as knowledge. Cabernet Sauvignon pairs well with. Rita gestured at Maya expectantly. Red meat. Maya answered, remembering how Mr. Chen always ordered his steak well done with whatever house red they had at the diner. This was different. Here, they talked about notes of blackberry and hints of oak, terms that felt foreign on her tongue. Good start, but let's be more specific. Rita smiled encouragingly. What kind of red meat? How is it prepared? These details matter in fine dining. Maya's phone buzzed. Another text from Joe at the diner. The new girl burned the hash browns again. Kids miss your pancake smiley faces. She quickly silenced her phone, feeling that familiar pang of homesickness for her old life. The training was intense. Maya's days started at 8 a.m. sharp with lessons in everything from proper table settings to inventory management software. Her nights ended with studying, learning about food costs, profit margins, and things she'd never considered before, like the psychology of menu design. One evening, struggling with a particularly complex spreadsheet, Maya found herself missing the simplicity of her order pad. Back then, she could track everything in her head: who needed refills, which orders were running late, which customers couldn't have dairy. Now she was drowning in data about vendor contracts and labor costs. You look like you could use this. Rita placed a cup of coffee on Maya's desk. It wasn't the familiar diner brew. It was some fancy Brazilian roast that probably cost more than she used to make in tips during a whole breakfast rush. I don't know if I can do this, Maya admitted, pushing away from the computer. Yesterday, I spent 3 hours trying to understand wine regions in France. At the diner, we just had house red and house white. Simple. Rita sat down beside her. Tell me about your regulars at the diner. How many were there? Oh, dozens. Mr. Chen always came at 7 a.m. sharp. The Wilson kids on Saturdays for chocolate chip pancakes. Mrs. Lee with her gluten allergy. And you remembered all their preferences, their stories, their usual orders? Maya nodded slowly, beginning to understand. That's database management, just without the computer. You've been doing this work all along, just in a different way. That night, Maya stayed late, looking at the spreadsheets with new eyes. She created categories that made sense to her, just like organizing the diner's storage room. She color-coded the wine list like she used to color-code her order tickets during rush hour. Slowly, things began clicking into place. Maya started recognizing patterns in the numbers, just like she used to recognize patterns in her customers' habits. She learned to read a dining room the same way she used to read her section at the diner, noting which tables needed attention, which servers needed support. The biggest test came when Rita asked her to train a new server. Maya found herself sharing wisdom from her diner days. It's not just about taking orders. It's about reading people. Some want to chat, others want efficiency. Your job is to figure out which is which. 1 month into training, Maya was organizing the wine cellar when she found an old diner receipt in her blazer pocket. She smiled, remembering how she used to track orders with little symbols and shorthand notes. Now she was learning about inventory software and wine aerators, but the basic truth hadn't changed. It was all about taking care of people. That evening, she sent a text to Joe. Made it through my first wine tasting without embarrassing myself. Still can't make pancakes as good as yours, though. His reply came quickly. Proud of you, kid. But remember, fancy wine or cheap coffee, it's all about making people feel welcome. Maya looked around the elegant restaurant space that was slowly becoming familiar. Her feet still hurt, but differently now. She was learning to walk in new shoes, literally and figuratively, one step at a time. The morning everything fell apart started like any other. Maya arrived early at the restaurant space, still under renovation, her arms full of sample menus and cost projections. She'd finally mastered walking in heels without wobbling, and her confidence was growing with each passing day. Then she saw Rita's face. Something was wrong. Our main investor pulled out, Rita said without preamble, her usually perfect posture slightly slumped. "They're saying the concept is too risky, too undefined." She spread out the investor's email on the construction dusty counter. "Without their backing, we can't finish the renovations, let alone open in 6 weeks." Maya felt the floor shift beneath her feet. 3 months of training, of learning everything from wine vintages to payroll systems, couldn't be for nothing. "How much do we need?" "500,000. Rita laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "I've called every contact I have. No one wants to take a chance on an upscale restaurant in this economy. They say people are cutting back on luxury spending." Maya walked to the windows, looking out at the street. The morning crowd hurried past. Office workers clutching coffee cups, delivery drivers checking addresses, students rushing to class. All potential customers, all with different needs, different budgets, different reasons to eat out. Suddenly, she thought about the diner. About Mr. Chen with his simple coffee and expensive watch. About college students pooling quarters for late-night fries. About business people grabbing quick lunches alongside families celebrating birthdays. What if... Maya turned back to Rita, her mind racing. What if we're thinking about this all wrong? Rita looked up from her phone. "What do you mean?" "At the diner, we had regulars who came in twice a day for coffee, and others who saved up for months to celebrate special occasions. But they all felt welcome. What if we could do both?" Maya grabbed a marker and walked to the large mirror that would eventually become part of the dining room. She began sketching. "Look, we divide the space. The front becomes a casual cafe during the day. Quick service, good coffee, fresh pastries. Affordable but special. Like the diner, but elevated." Her marker squeaked across the glass as she drew. The main dining room transforms for evening service. Fine dining, but not stuffy. We use the same kitchen, same staff, but 2 different experiences. The cafe customers get curious about the evening menu. The fine dining guests feel comfortable coming back for lunch. Rita stood up slowly. A dual concept restaurant. More than that, Maya's excitement grew as she drew. We make it seamless. The cafe's copper accents become elegant under evening lighting. These community tables work for both laptop warriors and wine tastings. We're not just a fine dining restaurant trying to fill seats at lunch, or a cafe pretending to be fancy at night. We're both, authentically. She thought about her own journey, from diner waitress to restaurant management trainee. It's about breaking down walls. Good food, good service, good experiences shouldn't be limited to one type of customer. Rita was quiet for a long moment, studying the drawings. "The investment needed would be less," she said slowly. "We could open the cafe first, build a customer base. And the cafe revenue helps support the fine dining side until it's established," Maya finished. She'd learned enough about financials now to understand cash flow. "Plus, we can cross-train staff, maximize kitchen efficiency, reduce waste." "You've learned more than just wine pairings, haven't you?" Rita smiled, really smiled, for the first time that morning. Maya thought about all those early mornings at the diner, watching people from all walks of life find comfort in the same space. "I learned that good food brings people together, and that sometimes the best ideas come from knowing both sides of the counter." That afternoon, Rita called an emergency meeting with the remaining investors. Maya presented her concept, her hands shaking but her voice steady. She talked about community and accessibility, about creating a space that could evolve with its customers throughout the day. She shared stories from the diner, explaining how they could translate those lessons of hospitality into something new and exciting. One by one, the investors began to nod. Questions about target demographics turned into discussions about menu planning. Concerns about risk became conversations about phased openings. As Maya drove home that evening, she passed the diner. The lights were on, the windows steamy with grill smoke and conversation. She thought about texting Joe to share her news but decided to wait. Tomorrow she'd stop by for coffee and tell him in person. After all, he taught her that the best stories are always told face to face, preferably over a hot cup of coffee and a slice of pie. Opening night felt like a dream, and a nightmare rolled into one. Maya stood in the newly finished kitchen of Dawn and Dusk, the name capturing their unique dual-concept vision. The morning cafe had already completed its first successful day, and now the space had transformed for its evening divot. She checked her reflection in the polished steel of the prep station. The nervous waitress in comfortable shoes was gone, replaced by an assistant general manager in a tailored black suit. Her old diner nameplate had been traded for an elegant silver one, but she'd kept her lucky pen tucked in her pocket. Some habits die hard. 10 minutes until doors open. Rita called from the dining room. Maya could hear the staff buzzing with nervous energy. She'd trained them herself, blending Rita's fine dining standards with the warmth she'd learned at the diner. Remember, she gathered the servers for a final pep talk. These aren't just customers walking through those doors. They're people coming to celebrate, to connect, to make memories. Treat them like family, but family you really want to impress. The dining room looked magical. The casual cafe tables had been transformed with crisp white linens and soft lighting. Copper accents that looked homey during the day now gleamed elegantly in the evening light. The community board showing coffee specials now displayed their carefully curated wine list. The first guests arrived. Food critics from the city's top magazines. Maya's heart pounded as she guided them to their table, remembering how she used to seat truckers and teachers at the diner. The critics' questions were different, but the principle was the same. Make them feel welcome. Anticipate their needs. Then she heard familiar voices at the door. Her old diner regulars had arrived, dressed in their Sunday best. Mr. Chen wearing a tie she'd never seen before. The Wilson kids cleaned up and wide-eyed at the fancy setting. Even Mrs. Lee, who trusted Maya to handle her gluten allergy with the same care at this upscale venue. Your usual coffee, Mr. Chen. She smiled, falling into old habits. We have a special reserve blend I think you'll love. The kitchen ran like a symphony, but even symphonies hit wrong notes. 20 minutes into service, the wine refrigerator's temperature started fluctuating. Maya remembered the time the diner's freezer broke during summer lunch rush. You adapt, you solve, you keep smiling. She quickly rearranged the wine service, moving the affected bottles to the backup cooler while keeping the sommeliers informed of which vintages to recommend. Crisis averted, but then came the news that a VIP guest had arrived early. They were still preparing his special dietary requests. Maya took a deep breath and did what she'd always done at the diner. She went to the table herself. Instead of rushing the kitchen, she bought time by sharing the restaurant's concept, turning a potential disaster into an engaging moment. The guest was so interested in their dual concept story that he didn't notice the slight delay. From the corner of her eye, she caught sight of Joe, her old diner cook, sitting at the bar. He gave her a thumbs up as she passed. He'd helped test recipes during their development phase, adding his diner magic to their elevated menu. The critics were currently raving about their signature dish, a gourmet take on his classic meatloaf, though that was their little secret. The night wasn't perfect. A server dropped a tray of glasses. Maya helped clean up, just like old times. The point-of-sale system froze briefly. She remembered the diner's ancient cash register that needed occasional sweet-talking. One table complained their steak was overcooked. She handled it with the same grace she'd used with picky breakfast orders. But through it all, something magical was happening. The space filled with laughter and conversation. City professionals chatted with her old diner regulars at the bar. Food critics found themselves sharing wine recommendations with retired teachers. The Wilson kids were teaching a famous food blogger how to properly twirl spaghetti. Near the end of service, Rita pulled her aside. Look, she whispered, gesturing to the dining room. Every table was full. Every face was smiling. The warm glow of success wasn't just from the carefully designed lighting. Maya looked around at her new world. The familiar feeling of busy service wrapped in an elegant new package. She'd worried about losing something in this transformation, but instead, she'd gained something more. The ability to create not just meals, but moments that bridged different worlds. As she watched Mr. Chen teach a young couple of the proper way to drink espresso, Maya felt her lucky pen in her pocket and smiled. Some things change, some stay the same, but good hospitality, she'd learned, was universal, whether served on fine china or ceramic mugs. 1 year could change everything. Maya stood outside the Golden Spoon Diner, watching the morning sun play across the familiar windows. The neon, open sign flickered just like it always had, and the smell of coffee and bacon still drifted out whenever someone opened the door. She was different now. The confident stride, the professional outfit, the tablet tucked under her arm instead of an order pad. But her heart still skipped a beat when she heard the familiar bell chime as she pushed open the door. "Well, look what the cat dragged in." Joe's voice boomed from the kitchen window. The morning regulars turned, and suddenly Maya was surrounded by warm greetings and familiar faces. Mr. Chen pushed aside his newspaper, beaming at her from his usual spot. Dawn and Dusk's doing so well, we're thinking about expanding, Maya said, sliding onto her old favorite stool at the counter. Rita suggested we look at different locations, but, she smiled, looking around the diner, I had another idea. Joe wiped his hands on his apron and came out from the kitchen. He taught her everything she knew about cooking and customer service, back when she was just a waitress trying to make ends meet. Now she was here to offer him a partnership. The thing is, Maya continued, pulling out some papers from her briefcase. What makes Dawn and Dusk special isn't just the fancy wine list or the double concept. It's the way we make everyone feel welcome, whether they're spending $5 or $500. And I learned that right here. She spread out the proposal on the counter. We want to partner with select diners, places with heart, with history. Not to change them, but to help them grow. Imagine the Golden Spoon, but with some upgrades. Better equipment, expanded menu options, barista quality coffee. You keep your soul, but we help you shine a little brighter. Joe picked up the papers, his reading glasses perched on his nose. You want to invest in diners. Most folks these days want to tear them down, build something trendy. That's exactly why it'll work, Maya said, her voice passionate. People crave authenticity. At dawn and dusk, our most popular breakfast item is your recipe for cinnamon rolls, just served on fancy plates with fancy coffee. We're not trying to replace diners. We want to celebrate them. The morning sun streamed through the windows, catching the chrome trim on the counter. Maya remembered all the mornings she'd spent here, refilling coffee cups and memorizing orders. Each lesson had led her to this moment. Look, she pulled up some photos on her tablet. We've already done market research. People love the idea of their favorite local spots getting some love, but staying true to what makes them special. We keep the heart, just add some new possibilities. Joe studied the numbers while Maya chatted with the regulars. Mrs. Lee showed her pictures of her grandkids. The Wilson kids, now a bit taller, bragged about their school achievements. It felt like coming home. You know, Joe said finally, I've been running this place for 30 years. Never thought about changing much. But watching you this past year, seeing what you built with Rita, maybe it's time for the Golden Spoon to try something new. Maya felt tears prick at her eyes. We'll do it right, Joe. Promise. Those fancy restaurants downtown might have their expensive art and designer furniture, but they don't have your stories, your history, your community. She looked around the diner, at the worn booth seats that had held countless conversations, the counter that had served thousands of cups of coffee, the walls that had witnessed so many life moments. This place taught me that good food is about more than just what's on the plate. It's about belonging. Joe reached out and squeezed her hand. You did good, kid. Real good. He grinned. But you're still doing the breakfast rush tomorrow. right? For old time's sake. Maya laughed, feeling the weight of her lucky pen still in her pocket. Wouldn't miss it for the world. But first, how about some coffee? I've learned a lot about fancy beverages this year, but somehow nothing tastes quite like Golden Spoon coffee. As Joe poured her a cup in her old favorite mug, Maya looked around at the morning crowd. The mix of regulars and new faces, all sharing the same space, the same moments. She'd worried that moving up meant leaving things behind, but now she understood. Sometimes the best way forward is to remember where you came from and to help others along the way. The diner's bell chimed as new customers walked in. Maya automatically turned toward the sound, then smiled as one of the new servers greeted them. Some habits never change, and maybe they shouldn't. After all, every great journey has a beginning, and hers had started right here, with a bell chime and a coffee pot and a dream of something more.